So these were pictures that were taken with my Diana, which I got for 45 cents at a Goodwill in Fairfax, California in 1976, long before many of you were born, but happily some of you remember that. And I think there were a couple reasons why I was drawn to this camera. First of all, again, the square image, which has been, I just really love it. There's just something about it that I know that like 35 millimeter is supposedly the closest to our natural field of vision, but there's something about this. Maybe it's like, being baby wrapped up, you feel safer when you're in a little bit, tighter environment. And also that I feel like the Diana, as you can see, obviously it vignettes things because it leaked light, which is why there was all that tape over the camera that was in the last picture. And I think so I loved what it showed me, and I really knew how to use it. I mean, it's like I knew that it would highlight the highlights in a certain way, and I would just not try and take pictures if I knew it wasn't going to work. I also really loved that nobody was ever going to try and steal it from me. It really was, people were much more willing to pose for that camera than any official camera that I ever had. The only downside was that when you advanced the film, it made this like sort of duck call sound, and that would always draw a bit of attention my way. But anyway, these are from a series called The View from Here, which is also a Blue Sky book. Thank you. And it's work that was taken over like 33 years using this camera, and I still love it. I don't really use it anymore, but I think I still have like 20 rolls of film that I haven't developed yet. So let's see if we can get to my next, what's my next one? Come on. Oh, there we go. Still being very much in love with the square and with snapshot photography. For many, well, I guess it was about 3 to 5 years that I used a Polaroid SX70. And again, I loved it. First of all, I'm a very impatient girl, so Polaroids make me very happy because it's like, and they just come right out. The other thing is that the emulsion, I mean, you won't find a red, unfortunately, neither of these pictures really show it, but you won't find a red any redder than the red in a Polaroid SX70 because the emulsion was so thick. It was like, and it squeegeed out underneath the plastic. And so there was something about the immediacy, the square, and I guess, there's a bit of an intimacy about using a snapshot camera. You are so showing something personal, whether it's personal or not. But this work, also published by Blue Sky, man, I owe you guys a lot, is called, from a book called and a project called She Began to Realize. And that title comes from, I was down visiting my mother in Virginia, and I was photographing with the SX70, and I looked out of the window, and there were all of her like old lady panties hanging on the laundry line along with her support hose. And suddenly it popped into my head, the confrontation was that of unavoidable adulthood. And the full line is, she began to realize that the confrontation was that of unavoidable adulthood. And it's been that ever since. So the way that this work was created was I would just go out and shoot whatever I wanted to shoot. And then I'd come home in my little, one-room studio and play cards with the images and see which ones felt like they belonged together. And when they did, then I would write whatever the sentences that ran with them. And I tried different ways of doing this. I would take one picture that I really loved, and I'd go out and try and picture, and I'd come up with a line that I loved, and I'd try and go out and take the other picture, and it never, ever worked. So these are two that that worked. And the top one says, once a month, everything started to look like fertility symbols. And the bottom one says, as a child, she had always tried to stay inside the lines of her coloring books, which is true on both counts. Which then brings us to what? Okay. Fast forward like 30 years. When my mom, as I said, had Alzheimer's and was living in Virginia, and ultimately my brother and I moved her to assisted living up here in the Hudson River Valley. And when that happened, I left my home in Brooklyn. I lived in the city for 33 years. That's New York City for you guys. And moved up here so that I could be closer to her. And I, moved to Poughkeepsie, which is where, I'd also gone to Vassar. But when I got here, I didn't really know many people. So literally for the first year, I walked around and I just took pictures of whatever I saw. So that became a project called Notes in Passing. And these are some images from that series. It was just, there is only one person in all of these pictures, and you wouldn't even know that that person is there. But I think I've always been drawn to like the little idiosyncratic things that surround us, that things that might catch your eye, but only in its periphery, but in some way demand that you look at them head on, but nobody ever does. And that's what I think I've tried to take pictures of those things a lot over the years. So this is Notes in Passing. And after a year of not having any people in my pictures, I thought, maybe I should, there are people in the world. Maybe I should acknowledge their existence, which led to this. This is a project called Radius, where I photographed as many people within a 5-mile radius of my home here in Poughkeepsie as would let me. And ultimately that amounted to over 750 folks who also shared certain information with me. And these are just 3 out of the 752. But they are amongst my favorites. The first on the left is Meg, and I'm going to have to read this because it's pretty. Meg outside Stop and Shop. When I asked if there was anything interesting that I should know about her, she quickly and flatly answered, "No." I laughed and said, "Well, then what would your mother say about you?" She smiled, looked down, and said that I'm wonderful. The next one, these ladies were so funny. OMG. Marianne and Marilyn on the walkway over the Hudson wearing their homemade camera obscura boxes. As I raised my camera to take their picture, I heard a giggle from Marianne and a muffled "girls just want to have fun" from Marilyn. And then we have the wonderful Malik. Malik outside the public parking lot off Market Street. He said, "It's kind of hard to look cool in my Walmart uniform." I told him he was wrong, and he was. So that project took me a little bit over a year. And I did end up doing a self-published book of Radius, and also had a couple shows, both of which were up here in Poughkeepsie. And, I still see these people all the time, and which is kind of wonderful. It really gave me this sense. Also, first of all, I think of the durability of humanity. I mean, so many of the people that I spoke with had gone through so many unbelievable challenges, but also that at heart, we have so much more in common than we think we do. And it was such a great project to do because it connected me to my community in a way that I've really never been connected before to any community, really. So thanks all of the people that participated in Radius. Then we have, now the work that's in now was made during the pandemic, but these were made during the very, very beginning of the pandemic. This is a project called When We Weren't Watching. And Poughkeepsie is about an hour and a half north of New York City, where at this time, people were dying at such a rate of COVID that they were being, stored in refrigerator trucks because there wasn't enough room in the funeral homes. And so when our governor said shelter in place, I sheltered in place. And this was what came out of that. I ended up, first of all, over the years, I mean, literally over decades, almost my entire life, I've collected these funky and funny little cake toppers. And, they've all been up in the attic. And so when I was like sort of completely unable to go outside, I don't know why, but I decided to use my dresser top in my bedroom, my bathroom, and my kitchen as my pandemic studios. And these are just some of the images that I created using those arenas as places to create these little vignettes or little fantasy scenes. And, they were so much fun to do. I mean, being able to laugh during that time particularly at oneself, was really liberating and really, kept the endorphin level up when it was very hard to do so. So these are when we weren't watching. And all right, now we get to now. And so I took these pictures during the most cloistered days of the COVID pandemic, a time during which the safest way to engage with the world was visually and often from a distance. Those days are the now to which these images refer. When I took them, they felt shadowy, silent, and solitary. But no matter how isolated my picture taking was then, there always seemed to be a sliver of beauty that hinted at a time when life would be louder, lighter, and far less lonely. That, I hope, is our new now. So that is the intro, and here we go. Now let me see if I can you guys up here. I live very close to Vassar in Poughkeepsie, and Vassar has a 495-acre farm that is just heavenly. It's really beautiful, and nobody was there, I mean, for the most part during the pandemic. So I got to just go into all the places that, were marked private and staff only. And these are the beehives at Vassar Farm. Come on. Oh, there we go. This is Tattered Billboard with Face. This is just down the hill from where I live. Child's shoes on branch in front of house. And, I just drove by this house yesterday and the shoes aren't there anymore. I'm not really surprised, but in fact, I've noticed a lot how many things that I've photographed over the last 5 years in particular are gone. And it made me reflect on a lot of things, in particular, my parents and grandparents, how many of the things that they saw and, places that they lived or places that they even bought their clothes at, they don't exist anymore. And what it was like to see those things vanish. And I feel like, I don't mean to sound like a really old fart, even though I am, but things are going fast these days. So the shoes are gone. Puffy cloud with trees. Sorry. This is also Vassar Farm. Rows of Sharon bushes at cemetery entrance. Police tape saint. Frankly, I think the entire Catholic Church should be behind police tape, but sorry. Sorry to all the Catholics out there. Abandoned building at Quiet Cove Park, which is one of my favorite places to go here in Poughkeepsie. I feel really lucky because Poughkeepsie does have so many public places that you can go that are really beautiful and they're free. And this is just one of them that's just down the road from me, which is, by the way, this is a building that was used to repair boats, because this is literally right on the Hudson River. I mean, like right to the left is the Hudson River. TP at Springside. Springside is actually the site of Matthew Vassar's original home, and the house isn't there anymore, but there's this little, sort of gem of a park in which I discovered a teepee one time. Who knows, but there it was. I had to photograph it. Sapling tubes at Vassar Farm. Morning glory vines on backyard fence. I did a lot of skulking during the course of this project. But again, it was almost like, the world had shut down so much that I don't think anybody ever really yelled at me or called me out for doing anything that I can recall, which is good. Arbor vitae growing through fence. I've always thought that I wanted to do a series called Arbre captif, which is, captive trees in French, but saying it in French makes it sound so much more exciting. And this was the picture that made me think of the series. I haven't done it yet. Abandoned resort in Kerhonkson. S-shaped cloud. S is in Sam-shaped cloud. I'm gonna say, we give good cloud here in Poughkeepsie. We really do. Tree growing between fence slats. Section of stone wall with trees. This was just really weird. I have no idea, but it was just this piece of wall, nothing else. Plane in fog at Dutchess County Airport. Meadow with clouds at Vassar Farm. See what I mean about the clouds? Dead vines on back of garage. Street memorial with stuffed animal. You know, this has been there for years. And I mean, it's still there. That little stuffed animal has lasted years in, you know, winter and rain and everything else. It's really quite remarkable. People really keep it, you know, up. Tarp over dirt pile on Hooker. And it's funny today, again, I was thinking about things that were gone and I drove by this and that's still there. And that has been there also for years. So very interesting what we cherish here in Poughkeepsie. Patched fence outside 7-Eleven on Hooker. Child's swing in Warius Park. Oddly cut tree at Springside. This still amazes me every time I look at the picture that is still there. And I don't even know how that happened. How could that happen? But this tree is still standing. Morning glory blossom in reeds. Where the feral cats live at Vassar Farm. Mound of vines at Vassar Farm. Tree breaking through fence. This is another captive tree. Deflated Christmas characters in front yard. Now, I originally captioned these flaccid Christmas decorations in front yard, but and when I put it on my website, I got so many, you know, kinky responses to the word flaccid that I changed the title. It's like, what? I don't know. Spray painted characters on garage. Powerhouse steam pipe with shadow. White handprint on tree. Backyard fences. There are places that I went when I did this project where I thought, I mean, will I get shot for doing this? But very few, and nobody ever took a pot shot at me. Paint splash on wall. Tiny pine in field. Cloud with plane. Abandoned house on Mountain Road. Woods outside Rhinebeck. Hairpin turn on the way to Minnewaska State Park. This is, I showed the book of this the Now book to my dentist's receptionist the other day, and this was her favorite picture. I don't know why, but I really loved that she loved it. Like, I love that hairpin picture. Garden hose. Tattered flag on pickup truck. God, Charna, I just realized that's Charna. Hi, Charns. Cemetery headstone next to garage. Baseball backstop with vines. Water tower at Bowden Park. Plastic lilies. Old sign on back of building off Main Street. Tree with white streak. Plastic flamingo in yard on Verrazano Street. Covered headstone waiting for dedication at Jewish cemetery. Heart painted on post. House with tree shadow. Well, that house and that tree are both gone now, just FYI. As is this tree on the left. Large pine tree with clouds. Door on floor of abandoned warehouse. Boys' entrance to school on Cottage Street. Tree with chain. Space between houses on Jefferson Street. House behind abandoned nursery school. Numbered trees. Gas storage tanks on College Hill. Wispy clouds over sloping cornfield. College Hill Park. Crooked tree in cemetery. Discarded face masks on fence on South Clinton. Walkway by the beaver pond at Vassar Farm. I think that's it. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie. If you want, you can go ahead and stop your share unless you want to go back to any images. Feel free to do that. But folks who are here in attendance, we're going to move to a Q&A. So feel free to add any questions into our chat, and I will moderate the questions to Julie. But to get us going, well, one, Julie, that was really wonderful to see some previous work, but to also see the breadth of your project now, which if you're in the Portland area are able to come visit, there's 40 pictures up on the walls, which is just a treat to walk through and kind of sort of experience your quiet solitude during lockdown. But I really love the observations, and I loved hearing too about your what has changed or not changed over the passing of time. It's really interesting that you could go back and almost make sister pictures.
I was thinking of that, but it's been done. But in a way, the things that are gone, what I was drawn to photographing is gone too. So it's blanks, and I don't know how many blanks you can look at without. But I've thought of that. I mean, I'll have to see if some of them are worth it. They might be.
Yeah. I was the one with the stuffed animal was the most interesting that it survived that long.
I know.
I was curious how that time in like lockdown and that sort of quieter practice of yours has it changed your practice now that you're not as like closed in, in your own world as the pandemic has changed?
I'm still photographing very much the way that I did when I did now. Except for it's almost like every now and then a radius picture slips in there. Like I have to engage with somebody, and it'd be like yesterday I shot the beautiful Nancy who was wearing a sparkly top outside the medical center. I mean, she was just so beautiful. This woman, she had a great space between her teeth. And so every now and then I just like it's almost like they're the punctuation marks. The people are the punctuation marks in this longer grammatically parsed story of what I see. But I don't like to do the same thing all the time. I feel like everything starts to look alike. But nothing has presented itself that's that much different from now yet. So I'm looking.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful to at least have been able to continue your practice during that time when you're just like, nope, I am not going anywhere. And I also really love your cake topper projects and the use
Thank
of
you.
inventiveness, but also humor and color in that too. So there is a question from Liz Lamade, curious about your use of black and white and also routine. Were you roaming by foot or in a car as your practice approach, random or strategic? So a couple questions in there, so I can repeat if you'd like.
Black and white, I love black and white. It was the original. I mean, when I started taking snapshots, it was cheap. My parents would only buy me black and white film for my little cheesy camera. So I've always loved it, and it sort of pares things down to their essence in a way. And I've always loved that. But God, color. It's the world is in color unless you have some horrible condition. And but I do go back and forth. And in terms of my practice, I have always been sort of a solitary shooter. I don't like to. I mean, I'll go shooting with other people, but in a way, and my longest relationship was with a male photographer, and we would go shooting together all the time because our styles were so completely different. But a lot of the time it just becomes kind of competitive, or you're wondering, what are they shooting that I'm not shooting, or this or that. And there's something really wonderful. It was a combination of walking around and looking and getting in my car and just driving around. And there wasn't anything really strategic other than that I didn't want to be in a place where I would be disturbed, or if I were to be disturbed, it would be minimal. It really was about doing something almost like private, like let me privately acknowledge what I'm seeing. So that was that.
Thank you, Julie. And thanks, Liz, for the questions. And Lynn Robb says, beautiful geometry in this set of poetic pictures, bittersweet, but with layers of your humor too. So very thoughtful. How much editing is done afterwards? Are you always using available light?
Thank you, Lynn. I've known Lynn for so long. She's so talented. Also an incredibly talented photographer who started off as a designer and an artist, a non-photographic artist. Oh God, what was the question?
How much editing do you do afterwards?
Oh.
And are you always using available light?
I am, for the most part. When I shoot black and white, I'm almost always using available light, which I got in the habit of because I never, the Diana that I had didn't have a flash. There was really nothing I could do I guess I could have used studio lighting with it, but I just never did because I'm a very low tech kind of girl. I mean, a Diana has 3 apertures: a sun halfway behind a cloud, and a cloud, and I liked that. But I don't. On the other hand, the color stuff, when we weren't watching, it was really fun to use flash on that. It was a combination of flash and available lighting, and some it worked and some it didn't. But yeah, I just really, I think that the solitariness of the Now series really sort of demanded black and white.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Yeah, just sort of goes with the mood of the time, right? Thanks, Lynn, for that question. Joanna King says, I love this series, especially one, the heavy vignette. Seems this has been a trademark since early in your career. And two, the relentless ordinariness of your subjects, which somehow makes me want to look even more carefully at each image. Thanks.
Oh God, I love you. $5 check coming your way when I got my Social Security check. Wow, thank you. But I forgot actually on Lynn. I see Lynn's question here about editing, and I do, I do a lot of editing, but I don't shoot that many pictures of the same thing. And what's really, I've noticed this over the years, whether it was film or digital, that usually the first picture I take is the best one. That whatever I decided I was going to take the picture of, I took the picture of, and then afterwards it's sort of variations on the theme. Most of the time the first picture is the one that's the best. And now, what was the question that I completely forgot? This wonderful, wonderful person asked me.
I'm not sure if there's a question quite in there. There was a comment question about your use of vignetting.
Oh yeah. Well, again, I always really loved, when I started using with the Diana, I always loved the vignetting, but in a way it's a manipulation on my part. It makes people have to look closer at what I want them to look closer at. And because these are all, I put the vignettes in all of the Now ones. They weren't vignetted when I shot them. And I like that. I like being able, it's almost like, when a movie ends and the spotlight comes in and you have to look at that last, in old time movies, and you have to look at that last little bit of light before it goes away. And so that's why the vignetting, it just seems, and especially then there's, there was a darkness about that time. And we were more closed down, and the vignette was the embodiment of that.
Yeah, definitely. It also made me think about the scale, your choice and scale of actual print, whether or not that's intentional, because these are framed at 16 by 20, but they're square. So the actual image size is smaller than that. And I'm curious if you would see these bigger, or you think that almost like a Polaroid, that smallness actually brings you closer in, or if you would actually see printing these larger, or if the size is more intentional for that more like viewer experience.
Well, I would love to see these really big, but it's pretty prohibitive in terms of cost to print them that large. But you're right. I mean, I think I've always been drawn, again, even if it's like a square within a larger white frame on a piece of paper, that it really does draw you in. You have to step closer to look at what's there. And I've always loved that. I've always loved that, again, about not just smaller images, but images that include a kind of detail that partly, what the hell was she thinking? I mean, some of these are like, well, what? And or like there's one of a morning glory blossom in reeds, where the reeds are crossing in front of it and in back of it to create an actual, perpendicular cross, which I was almost not even aware that I took that picture, but I'm so used to, I think, framing things and centering things. And then I saw it. I mean, it's almost like I made myself see it, and I made it more central and more squared off. And there's something about that picture that I really love, because it just shows me how I look at things.
That's great. I love that. Was actually one of my favorites of your series too.
Thank you. Thank you.
So a good question comment from Sharna Flanzer. Julie, quote, I think was always drawn to idiosyncratic things. She's quoting you and laughing out loud. You think? I have known you for almost 50 years. Did I miss a time when you weren't drawn to idiosyncratic things? Do tell.
No, Charn, you're one of the idiosyncratic things that I love the most. My sweet girl, you're just the best. Charna, oh my God, another artist who has just enriched my life in so many ways. And we have known each other for freaking ever. but yeah, I mean, in fact, Charna was the best friend of my sister, another totally idiosyncratic thing. And when my sister was living in New York before I moved here, and she and Charna were going to the New York Studio School of painting, drawing, and sculpture. And I'm telling you, what a meeting was there. And again, how many years later, Charns? Sweet baby Jesus. But we have had some really, no, there's never been a time where I haven't been attracted to idiosyncratic things. And as I said, you're evidence thereof. And I love you.
Thanks, Charna, for the comment and great insight into your history of Julie. And Marcia Lieberman says, "Hi, Julie. These photographs are so mysterious. Looking at every day in a certain kind of drama. What are you asking us?"
What am I asking you? I think I'm asking, hey, first of all, hey, Marsh. My gosh, these are people that I have known for so many years. I'm so flattered that you're tuning in and that you took the time to look at the work. What do I want from you? I want you to probably just slow down and stop for a moment. And, I think what we all as photographers want is, I want you to look and decide whatever you want about what you see. It's interesting. I was speaking to a friend who lives in Portland who went to see the show, and he's leaving town tomorrow, and he just wanted to let me know what I thought and what he thought. And he was allotting to the images a lot of symbolism and intent, and which is lovely. I mean, who is it that said, I can't remember if it was Robert Frost or somebody who said about a poem, it's like, people would say stuff and it was like, well, all right, but I never thought that. And that's a lot of how I feel. It's like, see what you want to see, make your own story there, because we all have, maybe this is just like, maybe my work is just shining a light on some seeds, and you're the seeds, you've got the seeds, you grow what you want out of those seeds. I have no, other than making you see what I want, what I focused on, I don't want that much from you. Except for if you want to buy something that would be really nice, just showing people. Charna appreciated that. I saw that hand clap, but thank you, Marcia.
And thanks, Marcia, for the question. Craig Hickman comments, "I'm amazed at how effectively you integrate all of the elements of picture making: content, vision, light, tone, poetry, so forth. Each element is fully attended to. Also, this series is very tight, but each picture is unique. I've always loved your work, but I think you are doing your best work now. Are you just as excited about doing your work today as it seems you are?"
Craig, I love you so much. And I've known Craig since our days with, Chris and Janet and Craig at Evergreen State College. Oh my God, there went the neighborhood. I mean, I think it's interesting because what's going on with me right now is I feel like I have to come up with something new, but I still love taking these kinds of pictures. They're still what I go out. In fact, yesterday I went shooting I got in my car and I just drove around, and for like 3 hours, just pulled over to the side of the road whenever I saw something that was interesting. And, they're still vignetted. They still have a kind of silence to them and isolation to them. But they make me really happy. But you guys know that anyone who's a photographer knows that feeling of when it's like, oh my God, that's a really nice picture. It's almost like you can't believe you did it. And that because you can't see it until afterwards. And I think that's a difference between digital and analog photography. In a way, analog photography was much more magical. It was much more of a surprise because you really didn't know. And even if you got the picture, was it exposed, right? And, I'm so glad I got to grow up with analog photography. But I'm so glad I'm using a digital camera. I can't begin to tell you. For one thing, it's so much cheaper in the long run because you know how much color film costs, you know how much all that film cost. And then there's that big chemical thing. I think, it's a good thing I didn't have children. They probably would have had flippers after all the, selenium toner and other things that I used back in the day. It was like this red badge of courage to have your fingers be, Dektol or fixer stained. But I think I do. I mean, I get so happy when I take what I think is a good picture. I really do. It just, you go, wow, I love that. So yes, I do feel excited, but I'm feeling this little, funkadelicness about what's next. I really honestly just feel this pressure to come up with something that isn't the same. But it's my pressure. Nobody else is putting it on me.
Well, you may have answered this question, but Bruce Freeman was asking, did you shoot these on film, and are they silver prints? And also, hi, Julie, by the way.
Another person from my past. Oh my God, Bruce, wonderful. In fact, Bruce posed for me in a piece that I did when I was at the San Francisco Art Institute. And it was with my SX70, and it was him and another friend where I shot them. And those little things where it would be like, what's different between these two puzzles, like when you were in the doctor's office as a kid, like the high life. And that's what I did. And it was like, which of these things is not the same? Thank you, Bruce, you sweet child. No, they are not film. They are not silver prints. They are just good old digital. How can you argue with the fact that I can retouch a photograph much more thoroughly than I ever could in a silver print? I can completely manipulate it. And in fact, my attic series, if you saw the original photographs, you'd probably feel a little nauseous. They're completely retouched. And thank God for Photoshop and digital photography.
Yeah, there's definitely perks to both processes, because I grew up learning darkroom photography in high school and college, and but now, yeah, learning digital years later for grad school was a different experience. Yeah, there's I agree with you about the magic is a different kind of magic. But thanks, Bruce, for the comment and question. And if it's the Bruce I know, then Bruce is also one of our volunteers here. And it's been really lovely to get to know Bruce. And when he told me that he knew you, that was just so special. So I'm glad that he could be here tonight. And Liz Lamad asks again another question for you. When you returned home after shooting, did you feel more connected to people or lonely in the pandemic?
I think I felt more content with being alone. And I have to say, I've always enjoyed being by myself. It's rare. If I feel lonely, I feel lonely if I'm around people or if I'm not around people. It's sort of a psychic state of mind more than a physical reality. But I think I felt so engaged. It's like here it was, this pandemic, and I felt more engaged with the world than I did. Certainly Radius was so wonderful, and that was literally engaging with people. But it's almost like when you feel like, God, I can be by myself and still do something that produces something and engages me in the world in a way that is so deeply satisfying. And it is that moment, even though it's, digital, where, when you're printing a picture and all of a sudden this thing floats up through the, soup in a tray of developer, and it's like, what the hell? This is the most magical, wonderful thing. It's alchemical. It's like gold coming out of, a stick. And I still feel that, even though it's digital. It's like when I look at the pictures, it's like, yes, they do. They make me really, really, really happy. And you know what? I'm just really glad because, for so many years I was working for someone else, and I couldn't afford to do my own work. And, so for 30 years I was in the magazine business, and I loved what I did. I really, really did. And I learned so much, and it made me so, I guess, educated in terms of what was going on in the world and blah, 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 blah. But I didn't have time to do my own work. And then when my mom died, I inherited a little bit of money, and I told myself, look, for this chunk of time, you're just going to do nothing but your own work. And unfortunately, the funding has run out, but I can't stop. No, it's just like, that is what I've got to do. And I see Joanna King, for everyone, what cameras are you using now? Well, you know what? Here, let me show you. I have it right here. Here's my handy dandy. I told you I'm a low-tech photographer. I have probably, this is another, I like PhD cameras, push here dummy. And so this is a Leica Deluxe 6. It's probably the most expensive, automatic camera you can find in the world. And I love it. And then I also have, ooh, I'm gonna go into my underwear drawer here. Where's my Sony? When I shoot color, I use this baby. Because the flash works better. I like this one. And this is my Sony, what is it? Something 1000. But see, same size. And I find when I walk around with a little pouch on my belt loop, nobody runs away from me. If I'm a consumer, which I am, as if you've ever read, and we all have, I think anyone who ever went to art school read Susan Sontag's what's the name of the book? Come on. Anyway, she talks about the consumerism of photography. And in a way, we are all consumers, but I guess and this is another thing that I was just discussing with someone else. I think, were we talking about it? Maybe not. The prevalence of everybody having a cell phone is that I was really, really surprised when I did Radius. People were just fine. Just, can I take your picture? Yeah. And for one thing, it was like, I'm an overweight, almost 70-year-old woman. Like, if you want to come after me, you can. I won't get away if you wanted to come after me. And then there's also that everybody's used to being photographed these days all the time. So it's a totally different experience from when I was growing up. But bigger cameras are much more confrontational. They're much more, I am taking your picture and you better not forget it. And these are like, and I shoot pretty quickly. So, and I used a Nikon Coolpix the same way. I did use a Nikon F4 for a long time as a young photographer with a very wide angle lens. But, I used the Diana, and I have a Mamiya 6, which is kind of like a very expensive Diana square film.
Excellent. Thank you, Joanna, for asking that question.
On photography. Yeah. Thank you, Jim. I could not think of the name of it. Thank you, Jim.
And that's the end of the questions, unless we've got anybody else. So here we go. Let's one more. Or Joanna King says, as you grow older, you will find that you are more and more invisible, and you can go whatever, add whatever you want with no problems.
That's so true. She's absolutely right about that one. I was photographing a cow at a local farm, and all of a sudden, the owners of the farm, drove up really quickly in their pickup truck, with an eagle on the window and, their shotguns on the back. And they were like, "Are you with PETA?" I was like, "No, I'm not. But look at, even if I were, I couldn't get away from you if you wanted to run me down, dude." But it really is true, especially as a woman. The older you get, the more invisible you become.
Feel free if anyone has any last questions. I'll ask you, Julie, do you have any advice for any of your photographer friends or emerging photographers as your many years of shooting film and digital work?
Oh, I feel like I'm on the Miss America pageant. Well, I really hope for world peace, and do what just be yourself. It really is that whole thing of be yourself. Do what you really love. I mean, if you don't, you'll make yourself pay for it. Do what you love, put your heart in it. And sometimes I just think, don't think so much, just go out and engage with the world. And there's so many ways to do that. And if you want to think a lot, you can think a lot too. But I would say, again, just be yourself, be truthful.
That's
deep.
Wonderful.
Deep.
And Dan Boris says, just saying hey, and what a
Hey,
beautiful.
Dan. He's another one who posed for me in those pictures.
But it's been a lovely hour with you, Julie. Thank you so much for your time and for your beautiful show here at Blue Sky. And thanks everyone for attending. I know there are a lot of good friends in the audience tonight. So thanks for supporting Julie, and thanks for supporting Blue Sky. We really appreciate
May
everyone.
I just say in closing, also, thank you to Blue Sky and, to the people there who have supported me literally for decades. I cannot thank you enough. And to you, C, for being so, kind to me and helping me through so much, and for being so diligent about helping me get the show up. And to everyone who was so kind to come, your $5 checks will have to wait until the next month, but they'll be there. Check the mail. Thank you all so much.
Thanks so much, Julie. And everybody, have a wonderful evening and great rest of your week. We'll see you next time on our virtual Zoom artist talks at Blue Sky. Have a great night.